So just let me know when you're ready, Lazaro.
You guys are seeing the slides change and everything?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
awesome. Uh, awesome. Now, this slide has notes just before we start. You don't see the notes, or you do see the notes on
We do not see your notes. We don't see your notes.
Okay, excellent.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Leverage the Power of Possibilities of Emotional Intelligence. This is the Hudson Valley's 2024 March Lunch and Learn series. Next slide, please. Housekeeping. Please use the chat for any questions. Ooh, we just lost it. Thank you. Please use the chat for any questions, comments, and this meeting will be recorded. The recording will be posted on PMI's Hudson Valley's YouTube channel. And please ensure that you are on mute. Next slide, please. Greetings. Again, my name is Jasmine Clark. I'm your VP of Professional Development. Next slide, please. Just some announcements before we turn it over to our speaker. We have the PMXO Expo, which is actually March 21st from 10 a.m. to 2:45 p.m. And you can get to sign up. It's free for PMI members, and you earn up to 9+ PDUs. Next slide, please. Also, please save the date for the Spring Professional Development Day. It's actually Friday, May 31st from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it will be virtual. Registration opens soon. Next slide, please. And our next chapter meeting, Stakeholder-Centric Project Leadership, Driving Engagement, Expectations, and Impact, presented by Tarika Wheeler. That will be Wednesday, March 27th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. So please register. And the next slide.
And then that's me.
I will turn it over to our partner at IIL, Lazaro. Thank you, Lazaro.
Hello, everyone. Thank you guys for attending. We are ecstatic to have you guys join us. I'm Lazaro Valdez. I'm the relationship manager from the International Institute for Learning for the PMI Hudson Valley chapter. For those who don't know, your chapter is a member of IIL's Advantage program. As members, you are eligible for discounts and benefits from IIL. We also have a partner site where you can view your exclusive discounts as well as see what else we have to offer. We have our QR code on the right side of the slide, or I can put the link in the chat directing you to our partner page. Also, as mentioned, you have access to IIL's course catalog. Now, if you could bring your attention to our Thought Leadership newsletter, that's the next slide. We publish it every Wednesday, and it includes 3 articles regarding topics like leadership, project management, AI, and much more. We also have tons of free resources. If you enjoy this webinar, you may also enjoy some of our free webinars that we release twice a month. We also have white papers that you can enjoy as well. All right, and that's also me, guys. That is all from me. I will put the links in the chat, as I will provide my email address if you'd like to contact me directly for questions. I'm also an educational consultant, so if you have any questions regarding courses, I can assist you with that as well. And up next, we have Ed Lively. I'm going to pass it over to him. I hope you guys enjoy.
And welcome, everybody, from Hudson Valley PMI chapter. Today, we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence and leveraging the power and possibility of emotional intelligence. The topics that we're going to cover include what is emotional intelligence. I'm going to try and make a business case for emotional intelligence and talk about deconstructing it. We're going to talk about the neuroscience behind emotional intelligence and the power of choice, changing a behavioral habit towards one that includes emotional intelligence, and how you build your own emotional quotient, your EQ. One of the things that I like to start all of my classes with is an understanding that I teach 59 courses, and they range from interpersonal to project, program, portfolio, to accounting and finance. And the foundation for all of those, no, let me correct that. The foundation of everything I do in life is based on relationship skills. And by relationship skills, I'm talking about respect, where you listen to people even if you disagree with them, building rapport, getting to know someone else. And when you find something of a common interest, that's the strongest kind of rapport you can have. And trust. And trust is also built on three things. Everything in my world's built on three things because I can't remember four things. But it's built on competency. You can trust I can do what I say I can do. It's built on integrity. I do what I say I'm going to do. And it's built on transparency, that I'm willing to share something of myself and not hide important information. So keep that in mind throughout this, that the things that make what you learned in school and on the job work better are relationship skills. In organizations, real power and energy is generated through these relationships. The pattern of relationships and capacities to form them are more important than the tasks, functions, and positions. And it took me a long time to understand this. When I was younger, I served in many capacities. I was a chief financial officer for several years. I had worked in sales. I've worked in accounting in a lot of different areas. And I always thought being good at your job was enough. It took me until probably into my 40s before I started realizing that relationships were the real energy behind what we do. The patterns of relationships and capacities to form them are much more important than the tasks, functions, roles, and positions that are out there. So, what is this thing that we call emotional intelligence? Okay. A lot of times we use it as a verb, but here I want to introduce it as a noun, a name. It's the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. Emotional intelligence is the key to both personal and professional success. It's what gets you from sometimes being the rank and file employee to becoming the CEO of an organization. Emotions are also our greatest source of energy, motivation, connection, and influence. I first met my wife when we were working at Harcourt Assessment, a division of Reed Elsevier Publishing, the largest publishing firm in the world. And I remember one day I was walking down the hall and she was crying. She's sitting on a bench outside a conference room crying. This was before we were married. And I went over and I asked her if everything was all right. And she said, well, I'm one of the new directors here for program management. And the other directors are saying that I'm too emotional. And I had to laugh a little bit. I said, that's because they lack empathy and they lack emotion that they say that. But it's actually a very powerful thing in managing people to have some emotion about what you're doing. Okay, I've got a question for you. And if you would pop it in the text chat, this will work very well. A person's intelligence quotient, their IQ, is relatively set by the time they're 16. At what age do you think a person's emotional intelligence quotient, or EQ, is set? A, 16, B, 50, C, middle age, or D, none of the above? I
It looks
see.
like the D's are winning.
It does. It does. And that's the answer. None of the above. It's never too late or too early to start working on your emotional intelligence. For myself, it took me later in life to really embrace it and to understand it. Because, like I said, I thought being good at something was all I needed to do. Some of the benefits of increasing your emotional intelligence in the project environment is to be able to use your emotions to improve and guide your thinking, to be able to persuade and influence others, to remove barriers to working with others, and to quickly transform change, problems, and conflict into opportunities, and to assist your team in delivering project success. We're going to talk about empathy in a little bit, and you'll see a film on that. But primarily, it's not a bad thing to show emotion. It shows that you care. Typical behaviors or habits we work with when we're project managers: we try to listen more. We try to be more empathetic, and empathy comes from understanding something in ourselves that can connect to the way other people are feeling. It takes some courage to share something of yourself with other people, and it definitely takes a great deal of patience. Okay, here are a few case studies for coaching project managers in emotional intelligence, the results of which were: Rachel has become more resilient in tough resource negotiation situations. Jack has become less reactive in pressured customer situations. Edward regained the trust of his project team. And John is more understanding and empathetic for the project team's point of view during a time of major transition. It helps us if we start thinking about the emotional intelligence lens when we want to change our behavior. So let's look at a business case for emotional intelligence. Okay. There was a meta-study done from the Journal of Organizational Behavior in 2010. And what they found out of 148 studies is that emotional intelligence significantly and positively correlated to job performance. Think about why that's true. Your ability to work with people, and project management in particular, is all about interacting with other people. And people are complex. They're dynamic. They're constantly changing. And we need to be tuned in to other people's emotions and their feelings when we interact with them. 90% of the critical success factors for successful project implementation were directly linked to emotional intelligence in this study. In a manufacturing company, project productivity goals exceeded by $250,000. Formal grievances in this company went down from 15 per year to 3 per year. Motorola reported that 93% of employees had an increase in productivity. And companies with executive or high levels of emotional intelligence are more likely to be profitable. This same research shows that people with a high level of emotional intelligence outperform those with lower levels of emotional intelligence, or EI. They're able to form strong relationships with others and have reliable support networks. They build real social fabric within an organization and between organization and those that it serves, and are surrounded by others who want to help them in times of need. Think about times where you saw someone demonstrating strong emotional intelligence as opposed to places where people just want to get the job done. How did it feel? We found that people with a low level of emotional intelligence may be socially out of touch. They may be relatively more prone to drug and alcohol use too, and to using aggressive and violent behavior to solve problems. One of my avocations is working with people who suffer from alcoholic addiction. I tend to help support people by paying for rehab for people I also take care of their homes when they're away at rehab and their animals. And I'm there whenever they need me. But without exception, the people that I deal with, a lot of them are so deep into their addiction that they're really out of touch with other people. A lot of times they come, if they work, they come home and they isolate themselves. These people with low levels of emotional intelligence tend to create problems for teams in the organization through their individual behaviors. Okay. People who are star performers in the organization realize the importance of emotional intelligence and try to connect with other human beings. In the end, it's all about impact. We sometimes confuse impact with intention. We always judge ourselves with our intentions, but we judge others by their impact that they have on us. You can have the best intentions. What do they say? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. But if we don't have that impact, it doesn't matter. So let's deconstruct emotional intelligence for a minute. Daniel Goleman, who wrote one of the first books on emotional intelligence and then followed it up with Emotional Intelligence 2.0, had a model. And he said, the first trick is to be aware of yourself, accurately self-assess yourself, show self-confidence. And then the next thing was to regulate our behavior, involving self-control, transparency, adaptability, achievement drive, and initiative. Then the next thing was to become socially adept, be able to demonstrate empathy and organizational awareness and a service orientation to other people. And then once we become socially adept, then we participate in inspirational leadership, developing others, influencing people, change management, teamwork, and collaboration. We need to know ourselves. That was Apollo's watchword. In his book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, he changed to measure 5 distinct aspects of emotional and social functioning. Again, it starts with knowing ourselves, our self-perception, understanding our emotions, being able to express our emotions in an acceptable way. We all have biases, but controlling our biases is important and learning to turn it off at times. Then developing our interpersonal relationships and maintaining our relationships with people. Then utilizing some of our emotions to make better decisions. Emotional decision making isn't a bad thing, as long as those emotional decisions are made when you care about people. You care about the people you work with, honestly. It also helps us cope with challenges. It helps us manage our stress a little bit better. High intelligence is a threshold capability. In Goleman's competency model, which was that study I was talking about of 180 positions from 120 companies, IQ only gets you to the table. It's really emotional intelligence that makes leaders stand out. 75% of the abilities essential for performance were emotional competencies. What do you think? How do you feel about emotional intelligence? Okay. In the chat, thinking about something through the emotional intelligence lens in a PM situation, what kind of situations do you face and what emotions do they trigger in you? Please use the text chat and just make a couple notes in there for me. Okay, I'm not seeing anything quite yet. And I see that we have some EQ experts in the audience today. Okay. One person says resources are not following through and giving excuses or lying about a situation. EQ is more important than ever now, especially since as a PM, we work through others. Absolutely true. When others don't meet deadlines, I get frustrated. Okay, I'm going to address that in just a little bit. We have to deal with disappointments. Milestone handoffs are maybe not smooth. Conflict among project team members may cause issues. Relationship building is key to having high performance team. You may end up with working with those resources again in the future. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Now, there are many different types of leadership. Most of you have studied these, but think about who does the real work of an organization. The actual turning out of products or services. Is it the rank and file or is it the management? Put a note in the text chat for me. That's right, Margaret. It's the rank and file that does the work. If you believe that, doesn't it make sense that the job of a manager is to help the rank and file do their jobs? To clear out any obstacles or blockers so that they can do their jobs? This is what servant leadership is all about. And I'm a firm believer of two styles of leadership: situational leadership and servant leadership. We talked about the need to be self-aware. Sometimes it's important to take a breather and quietly sit down and think about who you are, what you want, where you're going. Okay. Empathy. Now we're going to play, and you need to tell me. I'm going to pause it in just a minute because I want to know if you can hear this. Can you hear the sound on that? No. Okay. Let me include sound. There we go. How about now? Did you hear that? All right. Brene Brown is also one of my favorites. I've loved her section on blame too.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant. came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay, give me just a second to bring up slide again. Okay. So as I said before, we have to know ourselves, but more than that, we also need to know our biases. And we have to be able to self-regulate those biases and our feelings. We have to be willing to take responsibility. Take a 3-second pause. Okay, maybe I need a 10-second pause sometimes before I react to something. I need to monitor my self-talk. What am I telling myself? How do I believe? And reframing. One of the most powerful things we can do to help people see another perspective is to reframe a point of view. If I were to ask you what you think of organizational politics, what would you say? Is that negative or positive? Type that into the text chat. Organizational politics, negative or positive? And most people would agree with you. In fact, I would agree with you that it's negative if you're talking about backstabbing people, climbing on other people's accomplishments to get ahead. But what if instead I told you that organizational politics is really about using your interpersonal skills, using your leadership skills, your negotiation skills, your conflict management skills, presentation skills to bring about the strategic objectives of the organization? Might you think of it in a little different way? What do you think now? Does it maybe change your perspective? This is what we do when we reframe. We present a different idea so that the person isn't being convinced by us, but is really convincing themselves if we make a good case for presenting it a different way. We always want to invite feedback. We perhaps want to move from a position where we were initially to a more acceptable position. And I'm sorry, but humor is my life. I love finding the humor in everything that I do. Those of you that have heard me before understand that. When we talk about the neuroscience, we have the rational brain, the emotional brain, and the instinctual or reptilian brain. And sometimes we have, see that little yellow piece right in the middle of the limbic system? That's the amygdala. And we frequently talk about amygdala hijacking. This is where the brain quits thinking with the prefrontal cortex and swings over to the amygdala, which is the fight or flight center of our brain, making it impossible to come up with rational decision-making ideas. Okay. Now, it's very hard, as we said before, that making a social or emotional change involves rewiring those neural connections in our brain. I frequently tell people, you're asked to think outside the box, but you are the box. You are the sum total of your education, your experiences, your culture. And a lot of that's hardwired. You think in the same way a lot of times. To get outside the box, you really need other people who grew up differently, who went to different schools, grew up in a different culture, who can trigger a thought outside of what you would think of. And then that triggers you to think outside of your normal way of thinking. And you can think of many things if you're going in that direction that you wouldn't have gone in otherwise. This is why we value diversity and inclusion so much. Neurogenesis. Okay, fancy word. It's the process by which new neurons are formed in the brain. Neurogenesis is crucial when an embryo is developing, but it also continues in certain brain regions after birth and throughout our lifespan. Initially, the rate at which we create new neurons is about 700 new neurons per day. But it does slow down as we get older. Are there things that we can do to help keep continuing to build these connections in our brain? Sure. Good diet, exercising. Okay. All of this can help. It's about the only way that we're going to be able to rewire our brain. Let me see. I have another short video here. Now, it may not be coming up. Dr. Jill Bolte, a neuroanatomist, had a stroke. And she was able to relate in her TED Talk, stroke of, I think it was called a stroke of awareness. She figured out that there were decisions we can make about the way we feel and the way we act with people by utilizing our left brain and our right brain. One is a serial processor, one's a parallel processor. But she also said the amygdala hijacking that we feel has about a 90-second cycle. And if you're still mad after 90 seconds, it's your choice to remain upset. So that emotional circuit is about 90 seconds. You've heard, if you've ever traveled in London, a lot of times in the underground, you see all these signs that say mind the gap, which means to step onto the underground from the platform, not fall into it. But we also need to mind the gap when we're reacting to something. We need to take time to think about it. There's something called the ladder of inference. And a shortcut to this is to say that when we see something, we record it as if it were a video camera. We see the facts of what's happening. But quickly after that, we start telling ourselves a story about it. And then we use that story to develop our thoughts and our decisions. And sometimes the story isn't anything close to the facts of what happened. So we need to be aware of that. Now, there's ways that you can shortcut this ladder of inference, and that's by thinking the best of people. When someone cuts you off in traffic, at my age, I now realize that that could be me. And I'm a little bit more tolerant. We have a stimulus, but before we have a response, we should have a thought about that stimulus and how we want to respond. What's the appropriate way to respond? That's the gap. Don't think about the stimulus without having a thought about it before you respond. In the ABCs of change, we want to hit that internal pause button, adjust our behavior and our actions, and be mindful of the way we're responding. So, what does it take to change a behavioral habit using emotional intelligence? It's not easy. As you know, we talked about it being hardwired in our system. But moving from the old habit to the new habit takes work.
We all know that you create your habits and then your habits create you and they define you. So how would you go about hardwiring a more healthy or positive habit? And is it possible to replace habits that may be hardwired into you from a...
Well, this is really the basis of improving leadership abilities, is changing habits, because one of the common colds of leadership is not listening.
Right.
Just saying what you think. Someone comes into the office, they start to speak. It's like when you go to a physician and you start to say, well, doctor, I'm having this and this and this, and you have like 3 things you want to talk about. Well, in 18 seconds, they'll take over the conversation, steer it where they want to go, and you're out the door.
Yeah.
And you ask like 1/2 of a question. And it's the same with bosses. It's the same with leaders. So how would you get over that bad habit?
Yeah.
And the answer is there are simple steps. First is notice it. Realize, I do have this habit, and it would be better for me as a leader if I could change. In other words, second step, care about it. If you don't care, you're not going to get anywhere. Third step, think, well, how could I intentionally counter that habit? I could have a contract with myself that when someone comes into my office, I'm going to stop, pause, listen to them, and then say what I think. It's that simple. But to do that, you have to overcome years and years of another habit. And then the fourth step is to practice at every naturally occurring opportunity. And if you do that, you'll reach a neural landmark where you do it well without having to think about it.
Got you, yeah. Because I love the bit in your book, Leadership, The Power of Emotional Intelligence, where you've just got a list of attributes of good bosses and bad bosses.
Oh, yes.
So you just choose the good ones and you build them into habits. And...
Well, yeah. And by the way, that list is universal. Everywhere I go in the world, I get pretty much the same list, yeah.
We all know that you create your habits and then your habits create.
Okay. So recognizing that you have certain habits that are hardwired into us and being aware of it and wanting to change are important. Okay. Notice it, care about it, ask how can I intentionally counter the habit, practice it every chance you get. Okay. and you'll reach a neural landmark where you do it well without having to think about it. In building your own emotional intelligence, you need to ask yourself, who do you want to be? Okay. What do you see yourself becoming? You need to see where you are now. Okay. Maybe involve yourself in a 360 feedback assessment. Okay. Identify your weaknesses and your strengths. Figure out how you're going to get from where you are now to where you want to be. Put a plan together for how you want to close that gap. And then practice those. One of the things I realized early on in my life is that I was focused on me. Whenever I flew somewhere in the world, I was always telling people about me. Later on, I realized that I already knew everything that I knew. And the only way I was going to learn something new is by listening to somebody else. And that pretty much changed the way that I lead, the way that I manage, and the way that I interact with other people. I would rather now hear from them and what they're doing. In fact, on airplanes anymore, I see people when they're tired of telling me things, they'll stick their earbuds in, but I'll notice that the other end isn't connected to anything. Okay, that's pretty much the end of what I wanted to talk about. What I'd like to do now is take some of your questions, and these questions that come up, Jasmine, if you'd read them to me. Also, if there are other people that have comments that want to respond to these, please do. Come on, you need
No
to make me
problem. As they come in, I'll read them.
very good. Make me work for my money.
As they come in, hint, hint. I will read them.
You know, if you don't ask me questions, I'll be asking you questions. Okay. Well, let me ask you a question, all of you. How often do you take stock of your emotional intelligence? Be honest with me. Put it in the text chat.
Margaret says, I take stock every single day.
Very good.
Would it
Very
be too
good.
much pressure to ask Margaret what are some of the things that she does to take stock every single day? If you would come off mute, Margaret, that'd be great. No pressure. So also we have not often coming through, not often enough.
Yeah. I wish I did it more often, but I do it periodically. I take stock of where I'm at and where I'd like to be. Unfortunately, I'm married, so I get feedback constantly.
I was gonna say you're kind of forced to do that self-assessment daily. But I actually do that I do that every day. At the end of the day, I kind of just do a self-evaluation on, what went well, what could have been done differently, just to always kind of evolve in all my situations. But I also think it's because of the field that I'm in. I am a program manager, excuse me, but I'm in the child welfare human service realm. So to me, EQ is something that we've been doing for years, and it's now kind of spilling into everybody else. So I love it because it just helps you to kind of check your emotions and really think about what you add to the situation if you're adding to the situation to kind of make it volatile. So it's really just self-assessment. Great presentation, Ed.
I
And
liked Jennifer's response there, if you want to read that.
yes, thank you for the presentation. I find that my EI isn't where I want it. I often take stock whenever I have a disagreement with my husband.
Yeah. That's when it comes up, isn't it, with a spouse? Okay.
And Margaret says, I wake up and I'm aware that my way is not the only way. Everyone is different and have their own situations and own communication styles. I write down my little wins each day as it pertains to resolving conflict, not only within myself, but with others. Marianne also stated, I do frequently. I remind myself of where I was emotionally and where I am at today emotionally. And Lionel's typing something, so when that's finished, I'll reflect it as well. I was interested in the image of brain areas. Can you elaborate more of how we can, or if we can, access different parts of the brain, i.e., any tools or techniques to access different parts of the brain? Thank you.
Well, I found that interesting in Jill Bolte's presentation. She actually brings a live human brain onto stage with the spinal cord hanging down, and she opens it up so that you can see that both sides of the brain are very different. They have very different personalities. And one side deals with us as part of a collective. In other words, I'm connected to you and I'm connected to everybody in the room. And the other side is something that looks at the past and looks at the future and draws conclusions about the past and the future. And she says that she's able to, since she had the stroke, she's been able to find that quiet place where her self talk isn't active. And I'm not sure how she does that. The way that I have to do it is that I have to go into a room away from TVs, away from my telephone, and I just sit there and close my eyes for a while. And I try and take out a period of time. I also try to get enough sleep at night. At my age now, I'm 68. It's a lot easier to find time to sleep and get at least 8 or 9 hours of sleep a night. When I was younger, I got nowhere near that amount of sleep. So, well, listen, we're
Just
coming
some
up to the
comments.
top.
Yeah, just
Oh,
some
you bet.
comments in the chat. This was really great. It's a tool for life in general. That was from Margaret. Jennifer O'Keefe. Really enjoyed this. Thank you. Have a great day. Margaret mentioned meditating and clearing my head and self-love and positivity. And Lionel says, great, thanks. So I think you got some kudos. Definitely. This was a great topic. I think this was a great time to kind of spend at your lunch hour, lunch and learn, because we learned a lot today. So thank you so much, Ed.
Well, thank you for inviting IIL in to present to you. It's always a pleasure doing this. So thank all of you.
Yeah, so another question came up. Is this presentation available to us?
That's a good question. Lazaro, do you know the answer to that?
So there should be a recording of the presentation. There is definitely something that we do for that. I'm gonna share it below, and if anything, I can share a link to that. Just give me 1 second. I'll have that going for you guys.
Okay, thank you. Remember that you never stop learning about yourself. It's not a once and done process. Great and useful information. Um, I have found yoga and meditation to be really helpful for self-reflection. I only recently started doing these more regularly. Thank you, and another thank you.
Well, very good. Thank you all. You're very kind.
So if you could stop sharing your screen, I have 2 closing out slides, and then I can get everybody out of here. Ed,
There you
thank
go.
you so much. Just give me 1 second. Of course, I can't find it. There we go. And again, thank you so much, Ed. That was so informative, and I do appreciate the emotional intelligence tips and tricks for us. Thank you Thank you for attending today's meeting. And please think about volunteering for the Hudson Valley chapter. If you would like more information about volunteering, please contact our interim volunteer coordinator at member@large@pmihvc.org. Again, follow us on the socials, YouTube. The YouTube address is right there. Today's PDU will be automatically submitted for you. Just please allow 5 to 7 business days to process. And again, thank you. I am Jasmine T. Clark, your VP of Professional Development. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for a series, or if you want to present yourself, please reach out. That's my email address right there on the screen. But I would say happy Friday. Have a productive weekend and enjoy some of the sun today. Thank you so much, Ed. It's been a pleasure.
Thank all of you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Oh, Jasmine's not. Jasmine, you're still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I got that. So I see here that you're gonna upload this to your YouTube account. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So you'll be able to catch everything on there as well.
Yes. So if you want, you can send me Ed's slides and I'll just password protect it and we can send it to everyone so they have it, but it's totally up to you and how IIL wants to handle that.
Excellent. That's amazing.